I'm Dr. Erin Glynn, founder of Nutri Health and a proud member of WIN, Women in Nutraceuticals. I'm excited to have with me today Dr. Susan Kleiner, winner of the WIN's inaugural Research Pioneer Award for her significant contributions to advancing research on nutraceutical products and furthering nutrition science for women. Dr. Kleiner is the founder and owner of High Performance Nutrition, co-host of the Your Food Matters podcast, best-selling author, and co-founder and fellow of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, among many other accomplishments. Dr. Sue, welcome and congratulations on your award.
Thank you so much, Erin. It is such a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you. So, the Research Pioneer Award honors trailblazers, which you are, who advance women's research in the health and nutraceutical space. So, can you tell us, what does this recognition mean to you, and how do you see it reflecting on progress that's been made in this field?
You know, it it, it was incredible to be awarded this honor. I never expected it. In fact, I nominated several other women for the awards. So it really was a stunning surprise. And it makes me, you reflect on your career when you win something like that, especially being called a trailblazer. And when I began in my doctorate in particular, and I wanted to study nutrition and exercise back in the late 1970s, I was told there was no such field. So that was my beginning, but that I needed to understand nutrition science methodology, that I should become a registered dietitian, so I was kind of a card-carrying member of the club, and that I could communicate with my colleagues who all were doing clinical nutrition. And that was wonderful advice from brilliant women on the faculty at Case Western Reserve University who really supported me in guiding me. Nobody knew my subject matter, but they all understood the basic foundation of doing the work that I wanted to do. And so that gave me a really good direction and beginning for the way I've approached my entire career, because you're always asking questions that have no answers and trying to find solutions. While I was in my doctorate, and I was really trying so hard, and I felt like my brain just doesn't work like all these other people in my program. They can all remember all these numbers and memorize all this stuff, and I can't do that. And I remember literally laying on the floor of my major professor's office, rolled up in a ball, and saying, I'm never going to be able to do this. And she answered me, this is the late Dr. Jan Neville. She said to me, Susan, if being a pioneer were easy, everyone would do it. And that stuck with me, these few things along the way where I have had incredible mentors and guides. When you're passionate about what you're doing and you care so much, you just believe that you're going in the right direction. And the whole world was about disease, and I wanted to talk about health. And that drove me, even when people told me you will never amount to anything and never get anywhere. So to be at this point where there's a whole field, where there are academic programs worldwide, where I have colleagues around the world who recognize that what I was trying to do, they were trying to do somewhere else in the world at the same time. And today we have joined forces in the nutraceutical industry, is incredibly gratifying, but I am supremely touched and humbled to receive this award among all the other great people doing great work at the same time.
Well, you are very deserving and very humble. I know you always give credit to other people and those who have helped you along the way, and I think that's really important as well. But the sign of a true leader to acknowledge those who have helped you. At Supply Side West last year, you did credit a lot of your mentors and your colleagues for inspiring your journey. What first motivated you to focus on women's nutrition in the first place? Were you an athlete growing up? What kind of got you interested in the science of sports nutrition?
Well, I was a pre-Title IX girl. There were no sports for me in Cleveland, Ohio. If you grew up on the West Coast, girls could play tennis outside year round. I mean, you could be running, you could be doing some sports, but in the Midwest, we could play field hockey, and it wasn't intramural, even half court basketball. That was it. At my high school, we had a brand new Olympic sized swimming pool, and on the door it said boys pool. So so girls were allowed to be swim timers, standing at the edge of the deck and timing the race, but we weren't allowed to get in the water, right? So that was my introduction. I was a dancer, a modern dancer. That was my sport because that's something I could do independently of school. And I carried that all the way through to the end of high school, and then realized that I was curious and I wanted to go to college. And I found biology and I was hooked. And I just wanted to study health. And so I went in that direction, and I was fascinated with muscle growth. And I ended up in the right place at the right time, partnering between my university, Case Western Reserve University, and the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, where they had access to all these steroid using competitive male bodybuilders. And I that was my doctoral research, was the influence of diet and anabolic steroids on the risk of cardiovascular disease, and the influence on body composition in nationally and internationally ranked competitive male bodybuilders. And so it was the first study. It was a seminal study. It stands today as one of the largest in beginning to, number one, how do you document their diet? How do you document their drug use? And I was working with extraordinary physicians and exercise physiologists at the Cleveland Clinic in the sports medicine program. And we were collaborators. I wasn't treated any differently because I was a woman, because I was doing nutrition, which was predominantly a female profession, because I was even a student. I mean, I was really treated very collegially. Um, when I continued my research and I went to the Mr. and Miss USA competition in Raleigh, North Carolina, bodybuilding championship competition, it was the first time women were ever studied or included. And I recognized that they were, the whole sport at that time of bodybuilding, this is the late 80s, the whole sport of bodybuilding was underground, but the female bodybuilding was even subterranean from that, very secretive, with either no knowledge or really poor misinformation about their own bodies and how to take care of themselves. And that was my sort of introduction to an area where there was no data and they were asking me so many questions. I have a little caveat, is that several of my research subjects who had never been to college realized for the first time that nutrition was a science, and they have gone on and they are now faculty members, PhDs in nutrition and exercise science around the country. So there are two and maybe three, but two of my research subjects for sure that went on and now are scientists in their own right. So very exciting. But and that's the joy of the work that we do. That's part of it. But when I recognized that women had no data and they were coming to me for help, and I was kind of making it up as I went, and my colleagues as well, there were around 12 of us around the country beginning to work as sports nutritionists and sports dietitians, and we were just saying, how do you feel? Let's try this. And at a certain point, you realize that nobody's doing anything about that. and then there are products coming out with all these claims. That's really when it felt like this is not safe, it's not fair, it's just not okay anymore. And I was again in the right place at the right time at the Cleveland Clinic when Dr. Bernadine Healy was the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, and she went on to become the very first director of NIH, first female director of NIH, and she began the Women's Health Initiative. And so I just had this, this guidance around me that helped me discover what I wanted to do and what I thought.
Yeah, so you've mentioned a few times that all of the questions that you were answering had either A, never even been asked before, or B, certainly not answered before. Do you have a particular finding or something that really changed the trajectory of women's health?
Well, so going back to the female bodybuilders, and the bodybuilders in general, I mean, at that time when I submitted my doctoral research to the American College of Sports Medicine, it was denied for presentation because, and we used to get these pink slips with, I wish I would have saved it, but we used to get these pink slips that explained why your submission was denied for presentation at the conference, scientific presentation. And mine said that it was too nutritional. This is 1987, 88, American College of Sports Medicine. It was too nutritional, that strength training was not exercise, and bodybuilders were not athletes. That was the review, and so my research was denied presentation. I then submitted it to the American College of Nutrition, where I received a Young Investigator Award. I presented an entire 30-minute presentation rather than a little 10-minute one, and I won a research award of $5,000 at that time, sponsored by Procter and Gamble, and I went on to receive research funding from Procter and Gamble beyond that. So it was, it's all perspective. But what I recognized was that there really was something healthy about muscle building, that these athletes were doing so many unhealthy things, things that we understood were unhealthy to begin with, anabolic steroids. But besides that, the non-steroid users, and these were the males, were eating huge amounts of fat every day, tons of carbohydrates, lots of sugar, and yet their cholesterol levels, if they were not on steroids, were fairly normal, not perfect, but fairly normal. Their glucose metabolism was fairly healthy, and they never did any kind of cardiovascular exercise, which is all we thought was counted as exercise and healthful at the time. And so I got an inclination that there was something healthy about muscle building. Then I went to work with the female athletes who were not, for maybe 9 months at a time, cut most of the calcium out of their diets. So they had very little calcium. They ate very restricted diets. They had minimal bone building minerals. They had enough protein, but they typically didn't have enough of anything else in their diets, and their bones were healthy. Their bone mineral density was healthy versus what we were seeing in other female athletes with restricted diets, such as ballet dancers and female runners and women who we know had very restricted diet, potential eating disorders, and were on the verge of osteopenia, if not frankly into nearly osteoporosis. Not these women who were strength training. And I, posited, I think this is good for your bones. It's good when you work your muscles. It is healthy. And I all but got tomatoes thrown at me when I would present this. And I just stuck with it. I believed in it. And when I got to Duke, I had a colleague there who was able to do some of this research on exercise and bone in women, and we really started to see the beginning of a change, of a real shift. And I think for me, of all the things that I've found in my own studies, that was probably some of the most profound insight was that strength training was healthy.
Wonderful. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because I know you've done so much on the research side, but you're also involved in the nutraceutical industry. You have your consulting firm, you've worked with a lot of professional athletes and companies. Um, do you have any thoughts on current innovations or trends in the nutraceutical space, particularly with women's health, that you find exciting right now?
You know, I think the use of AI is going to shoot everything forward. I mean, if we have to wait to discover the molecules, compounds, ingredients, or to recognize, those may be new or novel, but what's already available to us that we don't know the multifunctional capabilities of these ingredients, AI can give us some of that direction. Now, without a full sort of breadth of data available, AI can't make it up out of thin air, of course, but AI can go through the massive numbers of biochemical pathways and perhaps enlist some of the new information that we have about developing research methodology appropriate for female centric biology, put all that together and perhaps discover, and I'm sure it's going on somewhere, discover much more quickly research areas that will impact the health of women and girls. So I think that whereas so many people are afraid of AI, and rightfully so for many reasons, but I think when used well, I think back to when I was just first a dietitian in the early 1980s, and we were hand calculating dietary intake and taking a hard copy of handbook number 8 and transcribing that data using the diet record that was all hand done and calculating the needs of my client. And I didn't start to do what was really the creative side of and the art and the science of being a dietitian until I did all this calculation by hand, hours of work, to the advent of computing and everything digitized, and it could do it for us. And at first dietitians were scared they would lose their jobs, and instead it freed us up to show really what our value was. I see AI in the same vein. The things that are just, you know, that you could get out of a book, but it would take you a long time. That's what we can use AI for. And so that innovation, I think, is going to move us forward very quickly. But the other thing is, um, watching brands change. I think, beginning before Win, but very much as the with the impact of Win, and seeing the inclusivity in leadership, seeing the inclusivity in the scientific director side, seeing science and business come together in brands, and moving forward with with a true passion and sort of for excellence for to develop products for women's health. That's super exciting, and I think that is very much due today to what Win has already accomplished.
I agree. I agree on the AI side and these companies that are really focusing both on women's health and the science. That's really important. So, you've spoken about the importance of standing up and being counted. How do you think your involvement with WIN and other organizations help create opportunities that are going to drive change for women in science?
So, it's risky to stand up and be counted. And, I've done it my whole career. Heather Granado sure took a big risk, and all the board members who were co-founders with her. I mean, people could have looked at this and said, Well, they don't even know what they're talking about, and it could have gone up in flames. I mean, it could have been nothing, right? And instead, the influence of a powerful group of people that believe so strongly in what they're doing, um, I think that authentic passion is catchy. And and so these all these co-founders worked for other brands, went to their own leadership and said, "This is what we're doing. I believe strongly," and their voice was trusted. And I think my role is the same in my world. If you've lasted over 40 years, you have a little gravitas, and that's it, right? People listen. And if they'll just listen, if you're honest and authentic, you believe strongly, and you've got the street cred to back it up, and you've got data to back it up, which was the first thing Win did, right? They did a study to show, and also grabbed other data out there showing that when brands were diverse in their leadership roles and in their various um, management suites, they did better. And that's what you have to show. You can benefit, and it's doing good by doing well, kind of, right? And we know that works, and I think that that's my role as well, just joining hands with everyone else, and we become a powerful voice.
I love that. All right, last question here. What advice would you offer the next generation of researchers and professionals, especially women, who want to make a difference in nutrition science and women's health?
Listen, listen. I I work right now with a gentleman um, who is a founder and CEO of the brand that I am helping start up. And I've known that my whole career, but now I'm working with someone who has been a founder several times over, has deep business experience, and he says the same thing. As a dietitian, my role is to guide my client. I can't force them to do anything. All I can do is prescribe in a way and guide. And the only way you can do that well is by listening to the motivations, the wants, the goals, the needs, the obstacles that your clients have. And I think in any walk of life, at any time, certainly from sales to getting grants in science, you need to listen and understand the needs of the people on the other side of the table, or whoever you're trying to lead, or students that you're working with. Listening and not being led by your sort of own needs, but listening to the motivation of the folks in front of you and drawing on the knowledge and the experience that you have. That's what creates success. I'm that it's that simple to me. You know, Going into this field, doctors would say to me, "There is no such thing as prevention. What kind of a crazy idea is that?" Right? And I'd say, "Well, what if it were you? If you could choose to get heart disease or not get heart disease, what would you choose?" Well, of course, I wouldn't want to get heart disease. Well, what if we could figure that out? And so asking questions and listening, those are really important skills, and it needs to be true, not just a facade. It needs to be really true. It's the only way negotiations come out well. It's how we succeed. In fact, you mentioned my work in Vietnam. Now I'm working internationally. I am not going to say, well, this is what we do in the United States. This is what you should do. What I can do, and all of my colleagues who are teaching, we listen and we learn what are the problems. What experiences do we have that have actually solved problems here that were similar? What experiences do we have that we know definitely don't work? And that's, we have more experience in that than we do the other. And I think that again, it's listening very carefully and working together to solve problems. And um, if as young people come up, the problems are not that much different, but the details are dramatically different that people face. And so each generation needs to learn how to communicate um, clearly and to listen well.
Yeah, very important. And I did a recent talk about women's health as well, and I think just having women a seat at the table is important because it's listening to women, right? The experiences that women are telling you they're having with perimenopause and menopause and things like that. And that has really shifted the discussion in terms of women's health in the nutraceutical space.
Absolutely. And, medical gaslighting has been on our doorstep for a very long time. It still exists. Oh, you're fine, right? You'll be fine. Take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. I mean, it's just still that way for so many women. In fact, I just saw a commercial the other day for a healthcare clinic that literally out loud said, "We listen to women." So, yeah, listening is a big deal, particularly in women's healthcare, and brands listening to their customers and having a dialogue with their customers. I mean, that's something that I get very involved with, is sort of that educational marketing, but the communication and learning and having a dialogue with the customer as we develop products and ingredients, because we shouldn't assume we know what the problem is. We need to hear and then figure out whether the solution fits the problem.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Sue, thank you so much for joining us today. You are truly a trailblazer in nutrition and women's health research and our industry. Thank you so much for joining me today, and congratulations on this award.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's been a pleasure.